For this first programme in our new series of the Antiques Roadshow, we've come to the banks of the River Mersey and the city of Liverpool, the city of Penny Lane, of the Beatles and some of our finest entertainers. But it was, of course, the river itself, it was the Mersey that brought this city great prosperity in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Liverpool takes its name from the mythical liver bird, the two of whom seem rather precariously perched on top of the Royal Liver building overlooking what was once one of the busiest ports in Europe, and one that played a very important part in many industries, especially the pottery trade. They shipped from here locally made tin-glazed earthenware known as Liverpool Delft, and for over 50 years, good quality porcelain. Appropriately, the finest public collection of Liverpool in Britain is in the city's museum, but many mysteries about its origins still remain for the simple reason that the Liverpool potters didn't mark what they produced, and the porcelain in particular is sometimes confused with Worcester. It's certainly true to say that many pieces attributed to Worcester were made in Liverpool and vice versa. As you can see, we've attracted a very large crowd here to St George's Hall in the centre of the city, surely one of the finest buildings ever to have housed an Antiques Roadshow. And among our experts in this first programme, many familiar faces from past series. On pottery and porcelain, for instance, there's David Batty, John Sandon, and also a welcome newcomer to the show, Terence Lockett. Two other well-known roadshow regulars are Hilary Kay and Eric Knowles, and casting his practised eye over the furniture this week, Christopher Payne.
Restoration, sort of 1660 and all that.
I feel like an introduction is necessary to your friend here, so what do you call him?
I call him Sammy.
Sammy?
Yes.
Sammy?
Yes.
At first glance, I mean, whenever I see anybody holding a banjo like this, I must admit, my first thought goes to George Formby, but in this situation, I think he's got more of a look of Viv Richards, the cricketer, about him, hasn't he?
I don't know. I suppose he has. Well, you know the history of it, don't you? Would you like me to tell you?
I'm here to listen.
Well, apparently, he's a replica of a lovely minstrel in the Caribbean at the turn of the century. And that is the story behind it. He's modelled on a true man.
He is?
Yes,
right.
Definitely.
Well, all I can really add to that is that the fact that it's obviously they've evolved from the Venetian blackamoors that were popular during the 17th century. And obviously he's more of a sort of a Christie minstrel type, isn't he? And
That's
I know
right.
that they were coming over to Britain, certainly in the last quarter of the 19th century. But this chap, I think, started off life not in America, not in the Caribbean, and not in this country. I think he started life in Austria.
Did he?
I think so, but I'll be frank with you, it's too heavy for me to lift.
I know, you can't lift,
But I did manage a sneak preview just before we put him on, and I couldn't see any marks underneath him whatsoever. But he's very, very reminiscent of the work that was made by the Goldscheider factory, and there were a certain number of this type of object also made by the Royal Dux factory as well. The actual technique is quite clever, because what they've done, they've used on the top here, they've used sort of majolica glazes to which were popular from around about the 1870s, 1880s, and they've got this very sort of nice sort of matte effect. I can see that there's some old repairs on it, because if we look very carefully...
Yes, I'm afraid I broke that when I was a young woman trying to move the banjo to watch him.
Well, we think they're clever today when they can sew on fingers, but
yes.
It looks like the Victorians did it here when they stitched his finger.
Do you know who did it? Stoniers in Liverpool.
Oh, they did?
They did it, yes.
Right. Well, he could be earning a fortune today with the crowds that we've got outside. I mean, have you given any thought to...
Yes, he could, really. We need a little box for him. I don't need to put the pennies in.
What do you think he's worth?
I really haven't any idea.
Right.
I've no idea. I've never looked at him from a monetary point of view. I just kept him because I loved him.
Right.
And I have no idea.
Well, I would suspect it would be around the £1,500 mark.
Yes.
Certainly at auction, anyway.
In fact, it's only partly the remains of a complete book.
That's right, yeah.
If we turn to the beginning here, you'll see out of the 26-odd plates that the first few are missing.
Actually, I got this of somebody who was passing by a building site, and as they were passing by, the first 3 pictures or plates had been torn out to kindle the fire on the demolition site. So they'd taken the first 3 out, and he jumped on that and got that, and I bought it off this person.
Did he actually have no idea of what he was doing, or hadn't he looked at it, or
The demolition person? No,
Yes,
he was just using it just to kindle the fire to burn all the broken wood.
Well, it's a great sadness because the value and the pleasure of books like this are that they are actually complete. But it's very nice that you did rescue it, because otherwise the whole thing would have gone. Now, the actual process is that the plates, the views, are etched, where the line is drawn onto a copper plate with a sharp needle, and the actual line is bitten out in acid. So the actual small lines here are all etching, and the dark black tone is aquatint, which was a process developed in the 18th century, which allowed one to fill in the shadows between the etched lines and the drawn lines. All the colouring is by hand, and what usually happened was that when the set had been printed, they were given to teams of young girls who would actually be responsible for applying an individual colour. Somebody would do the blues, somebody would do the browns, and possibly there was a kind of head girl at the end of the queue who would then make one or two touches and changes to bring the whole thing together. The value of the particular piece, I don't think it's immensely valuable, but each individual plate must be worth some kind of £50, so you've got about 20 odd left, so that's over £1,000. But it is a great shame, as I say, that the first few are missing, and it would have been worth considerably more if it had got its original boards and the covers and the first few plates.
Well, even stacked in a pile like this, from the quality of the porcelain, I'm sure these are all going to be Meissen plates. While I look at them, can you tell me anything about them yourself?
Not very much, really. I have had the majority of them given to me, some of them as long as 30 years ago, and a couple of them I acquired myself about 20 years ago or thereabout.
Plates like these were basically made as parts of big dinner services. I'm sure they would all originally have been quite large sets.
Could be, yes.
And they're all, in a way, copies. They're in the style of a mixture of Chinese and Oriental themes.
Yes.
But these were designed at Meissen in the 18th century, and the factory continued making the designs for a very long period in the
Yes.
Chinese style.
Yes.
They've all got quite nice and clearly the Meissen mark of the cross swords,
Yes.
which we find from the beginning of the 18th century when the factory first started up. They used the arms of Saxony in their factory backstamp of the swords.
Yes.
And dating from the mark is very difficult in Meissen because they did use the same mark over a long period.
I see.
These nice, clear, large marks with the curved swords indicates that they're of quite late days as we think of for Meissen. They'll be from the end of the last century and possibly into the beginning of this.
I understand.
And at that time, the quality of the factory's work was very fine indeed. The execution of these is really superb. Indeed.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
I like the colouring as well. I think that's very...
That's right.
Very nice,
They're all so different in their way, but they live
Yes.
together because they're from the same
That's
factory.
right, yes.
Plates like these are now becoming very collectible indeed.
I see.
These straightforward service plates tend to be worth in excess of about £100 each, and the more
Yeah.
colourful ones quite a bit more than that.
Yes.
A plate like this, for instance, that's really quite splendid
Yeah.
with the chickens and birds. That one looks a little bit earlier.
Yes.
It's a fairly unclear mark, but I should think that's probably 1820, 1830, maybe
as long
something
as
like that in
yes,
date.
Yes.
But lovely quality decoration.
Yes, I have actually two of those.
You've got a pair of them?
Yes.
A pair like that must be very splendid. I suppose they're going to be £500 or £600 for a nice pair like that.
Yes, oh
They're
really?
a good pair of
Oh,
plates.
that's interesting.
And that really is nice.
Yes, it is a bit... I don't think I've ever seen anything even like it.
No, it is Meissen again the cross swords marks, but in Art Nouveau style. Art Nouveau from 1900.
Yes.
The Meissen factory didn't make a great deal of Art Nouveau, but what they did were splendid designs. They employed leading artists of the period to create wonderful patterns for them. And the flow of the design, it's their traditional underglazed blue painting. It's the same as your other Chinese style pieces, but brought up to date in the 1900s.
Yes.
And that's a rare plate now.
Yes.
I suppose a good Art Nouveau Meissen plate is going to be £400, something like that.
Oh.
So you've got
Interesting.
an impressive little collection here.
Yes, oh, thank you very much.
Really lovely to see them all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I haven't the faintest idea what that's made of.
It's clay. We got told it was at the side of the river years ago, and it's made of clay. And it's not a fossil, but it's called petrified. It is an actual
Oh,
bird's
very,
nest.
very peculiar, isn't it?
When were you buying?
I've seen a few. Well, we've been collecting them over the last 15 years.
This has been quite recently, that's nice.
Well, yes. There aren't really any more about. We haven't had any.
What you haven't got, curiously enough, are any of the movable ones. They made them where you press something here and the jaw moves up and down, which was great fun.
Oh yes, now I begin to see we've got traces of the original wood there. It's a true bird's nest then that's been solidified in mud. You'd never find another one. I've never ever seen anything like it before. I've no idea what it's worth, how old it is. Can't tell you anything about it at all. It's just incredible, isn't it?
This is an absolutely exquisite dress. Is it a family one?
Yes, it's my great-grandmother's wedding dress, dated round about 1840,
yes,
I think.
Absolutely typical of that period, the style with the tight waist and the dipping bodice.
Yes, it would be worn, I think, with a crinoline or something to spread it out.
Yes, it would indeed have been worn with a crinoline, but what I think is so lovely about it is that the silk is in such beautiful condition.
It has very lasted well.
And this lovely, soft sort of combination of lilac and mushroom is very beautiful.
The detail is beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, these lovely, lovely buttons, which are purely decorative, in fact, because the dress unhooks down the back.
They're covered with crochet, I think, don't you?
Well, it's some sort of needle. I think it's more embroidery rather than crochet.
Yes.
And I think another detail that's so lovely on this is the way, instead of just a straightforward seam, all the seams have been piped, had a lovely
carefully piped.
piping. And I believe you brought a lovely shawl as well.
The shawl, I think, was worn at the same time, the same period.
That's very likely.
This is a paisley shawl,
so
again it's from the same part of the world.
And I think this might be just slightly earlier in date than the wedding dress.
Would it be? Yes.
Dating probably from the 1830s rather than the 1840s.
Yes, yes.
These are certainly much more sought after now than the later all-over paisley shawls.
Yes.
And absolutely, and again, this seems to be in perfect condition. And if we look at the back, completely unfaded.
It's almost the same pattern on the back. Yes.
That's right. It's completely unfaded.
Has kept its colour, yes.
Which is unusual. Have you ever thought about the value of these things?
I haven't. No, I didn't know how you could value clothes.
Well, the thing is that a costume of this date and in this condition is quite rare.
Is it?
And if it were coming up at auction, one would expect it to certainly fetch £1,000, which probably surprises
the dress itself, really.
And I would think again, a shawl like this would now fetch about £400 or thereabouts.
Really? Yes.
Now textiles and costume have come very much, into the collecting area. A few years ago, perhaps, worth very little.
What would you call them? I'd call them risque cards. You might call them something else. Page three cards.
Page 3.
The interesting thing about postcards is actually the type of cards that you could show to your maiden aunt are the ones that aren't really valuable because everybody had them. Now, very few people would put together a collection like this, really showing, for the time, and it was, 1917, they're pretty naughty. Aren't they?
Yeah, French.
I mean, all right, they're only drawings. It's not as if they're photographs, but I mean, really, to be seeing all this in 1917 was a bit strong, wasn't it? Tell me how you got hold of them.
Well, I'd done a job for a lady, and she paid me these postcards. She thought they were a bit naughty, I think that's why she
wanted to get rid of them. She was a bit embarrassed to have them at home, was she? Well, if the job was worth less than £3,000, you've done all right, because this is worth £3,000, this album. You've got over 300 cards. They're on average worth £10 each. Was the job worth less than £3,000?
A lot.
Well, I think you've done all right then.
This chap here is Stanley Reed, a very well-known artist. He's got paintings in the National Gallery. He's got paintings in the Liverpool Art Gallery, some in Southport, and sold a lot of painting. And he's painted every Lord Mayor of Liverpool for, as long as he lived. But he's dead now.
Is he?
And his widow gave me this. She's simply because I went to see her a few times to cheer her up, you see.
Well, I just thought, I was just struck that it's so fresh, such a marvellous portrait. And,
Is it, it's kind of thrown onto the...
Well, no, it's not thrown on, it's just painted with great bravura. It's just painted with great confidence that he's put down a brushstroke, and the brushstroke means something. And it's by a supremely confident artist.
I like the eye myself, you know. And the cheek and the way the lips are done and that.
Yeah.
There's 5 of those.
5 of those. Well, they're different. They're, of course, Susie Cooper. You know about Susie Cooper? Yeah, you read about it. Yeah. Everybody knows about Susie Cooper, but they're still very good. Crown Works Burslem, around about 1935. These are sort of Art Deco-ish, really, aren't they? You know, she's still working. She's 84 and still working. Yeah, 83 or 84 and still working. But those are like those, so they're very nice. Nice little copy set. How many have you got? 5? Probably about a tenner each, I think, at least. Yeah, what did you make?
I'm disappointed that nothing on this cresting or top rail matches the other parts of the chair we've looked at.
Oh, is it not?
You've got a flower head guilloche moulding. I love the initials, a marriage chair, WD, T and EB, with WT on that rather sweet little pierced niche there on 2 hearts.
Yes.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
Just 2 little hearts hanging. And the date, 1676, 1676. That, to me, looks as though, I'm sure it's original carving, an old 17th century wood. I'm not convinced it belonged to that chair.
Oh.
You presumably always thought it has.
We assume so, yeah.
I think this is why one has to step back to analyse these to start with. Let me just turn it round, see if there's anything we can spot. If I just angle it like that. Right. Well, 2 things come to mind immediately. The metal straps. Those don't look very old at all.
No.
Now, that could be either because the top was added comparatively recently, or it could have just been a strengthener. So that doesn't really confirm or deny what we're looking at. What is interesting is the colour of the wood up here. That very, very light colour under the polish where it's worn away. There's absolutely no wear and tear, no undercutting here where it's been carved out. Very, very flat indeed. I really do feel, by looking at that this top is probably from another chair of exactly the same period. Oh. And somebody's added it to this chair, contemporary chair. Very, very difficult to be sure, but I just don't like the colouring. But if you look at this, I just move it slightly, you can see, and if you run your finger along there, you can just feel that unevenness. Yes. That's a lovely sign. That is adzing. It's not been done with a plane, it's been done with an adze and chipped away to give that rather nice, uneven, rippled surface, which is typical of the construction of a 17th century chair.
Somewhat crude compared with the carving.
Very, very crude. Yes. But remember, it's only a joiner's chair at a comparatively crude stage of manufacture, a country-made chair. So it presents a problem. It's a lovely chair, nice condition, nice patination, but a made-up piece.
Surprises us, certainly.
People are now making this sort of chair, modern reproductions of fantastic quality. And if it was an original chair, a modern reproduction, it could easily cost you £3,000 to buy.
Good Lord.
But I'm afraid, being an original chair with a slight bit of bodging, shall we say, between top and back, it might be worth £800, possibly £1,000. Still not a bad price, but not as much as a modern copy.
It's surprising that it should be less than a modern copy. Certainly.
It's quite often the case.
Yes. Can't resist popping. Oh, well, sorry to say, it's not very old again. It's sort of 1930s. Literally just, again, just worth £1 or £2. So, but colourful.
Every series of the Antiques Roadshow produces a large volume of letters from you, our audience, and one of the questions you most frequently ask is how do our experts arrive at the figures they give as valuations? Well, the first thing to say is that can never be a precise science. It's an estimate, an expert estimate, on what a particular item might fetch at auction. However, many of the people who come to an Antiques Roadshow are not particularly interested in auction prices, since they've no intention of selling. What they want is a valuation for insurance purposes, and that has to be a higher figure, since it must guarantee the actual cost of replacement. So there are two valuations, really: auction prices and a valuation for insurance.
As I'm sure you know, it's a form watch, obviously in the shape of a ball. It's Swiss, and it can be dated around 1910. It's decorated in particularly blue-pink translucent enamel over a machine-turned ground. That, I hasten to add, is silver and not gold. Things that stand out from other normal ball watches are the fact that you wind it by turning the bezel, and of course the hand setting is by depressing this little pin and also turning the bezel. Some lesser quality ones have a normal watch type winder on them.
Yes, I see.
These rose diamonds here are particularly pretty and most unusual. Again, normally there is just a loop straight onto the chain at the top. The chain itself is decorated in the same pink enamel with little bands of white, and all in all, a charming piece. The market at the moment would obviously prefer this to be in gold, and if it were in gold, it would be really well over twice as much as a silver one.
I was told it was platinum, is it not?
Well, I'll be quite frank and say that I'm not able to get into it at this stage. If it were platinum, and it would be lovely if it was, if it were platinum, I would put a value on it in the region of £2,500 to £3,000. If it's silver, which at this stage I feel it might be, I would say between about 700 and 900. So let's hope for your sake it's platinum.
Yes.
It's by John Dolby of York, who painted in the middle of the 19th century. He was active between 1840 and mid-1850s. The exact birth dates are not known. There seemed to be a family of Dolby painters, but the actual connection between them is actually not established. It shows a hunting scene and some bad falls by the horses. But can you, you say you have another painting, a pair to it, is that right?
Well, it's very similar to this one, only there's a main horse going in the opposite direction over the wall.
Just a single one?
Yes, and the other hunters in the distance.
Yes, and what about the history of the paintings? How did they come into, have you had them for a long time, or have they been in the family?
Well, I've had them for about 36 years. It was an old friend of the family's who died, and his old housekeeper asked me to go to the house and choose anything I wanted of his belongings, you know, as a memento. And I've always liked these pictures, so I chose the pictures and some wedgeware plates and an old grandfather clock, farmhouse grandfather clock, and another little painting. And I wanted to give her something. She wouldn't take anything. I did give her £5, you know, as a sort of it.
Yes, because it make you feel slightly better about the whole thing. Yes, it's very nice. Well, it's a pity you didn't bring the other one in, because it would have nice to have actually seen that. He is not a fantastically important artist, but he is a well-known sporting painting artist. There's a certain influence of Henry Orkin, who was a very well-known English artist at the beginning of the 19th century. And there's, I think, a little bit of the same type of painting as possibly of Herring. Quite a tight quality. They're carefully and quite meticulously done. And I would have thought that the value was something between 15,000 and 20,000 for the pair.
Yeah.
15 to 20,000.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes, very nice. Thank you very much.
Right.
But I came down here for the pleasure of it, and it's been a great pleasure.
Life's full of mysteries for me, especially on this programme. And one of the mysteries that we've got here, which has eluded me for years, and I'm quite happy to admit it, is this mark at the top, this ME, which is quite obviously a sort of a foundry mark. But goodness knows who it is. I've no idea. There's bound to be somebody watching who knows. No doubt they'll write in. But anyway, the other point at the bottom, we've got here the word Musterschutz, which is sort of German word for registered copyright. So that's what lends me to think that they started life in Germany. The other point is, and I don't think I've actually mentioned it, they look like bronze, but they're actually cast iron.
Cast iron.
Yeah, cast iron. Let's turn them around and we'll have a look. Cast iron, and actually given a sort of patination to represent, give the resemblance of bronze. Easy at first glance to say, oh, these must be the work of Alphonse Mucha. It's easy to say that. It's another thing to prove it. But they are very much in the manner of Alphonse Mucha, who was a posterist and sculptor working at the turn of the century, who was patronised by the great Sarah Bernhardt. And he has this very, very distinctive style. When people talk about Art Nouveau, it can get very confusing. First of all, they confuse Art Nouveau with Art Deco, and then there are certain aspects of Art Nouveau which completely are alien to one another. What we're looking at here is what I would call this sort of very sort of French Art Nouveau style, as opposed to the more severe style that you get from Glasgow and Vienna. Very French, very much drawing from nature. I mean, you've only got to look at the composition of these sort of dream maidens holding aloft. I mean, this lady here looks like she's sort of out of a Waterhouse painting, a sort of a diaphanous clad nymph. But I think the actual, their value is very much in their sort of artistic appeal. They're rare objects. They're not the sort of thing that turns up regularly. Certainly the first that have turned up on a roadshow in the sort of 8 years I've been doing it. And I don't know, they're very difficult to put a value on. Have you ever, you know,
No,
I mean,
no.
You've got them insured?
First time we've actually let anyone see them or we found out anything about them.
Well, I think you would have no problem realising in the region of around 1,000 plus for them. I mean, they are so stylish.
As a pair or each?
As a pair.
As a pair.
As a pair. But, you know, it's always difficult, and one cannot be 100% certain when it comes to valuing an object which I've got no immediate precedent for.
What a novel locking mechanism this is. Push, open, and here, a little rocking couch. That's rather rare. Have you seen that before?
No, I've never seen it before.
I don't think I have. It's typical sort of ingenious Regency, early Victorian type of locks and catches they started putting on. I love that. Here, of course, we have the precursor to the wardrobe as we see it today, the gentleman's wardrobe or press, with these sliding shelves. I suppose it's probably by the middle of the century when they started to have coat hangers, and all of these would be pulled out, thrown away, burnt on the fire, or perhaps even used as little trays or something, and then coat hangers would be put in to hang a man's jacket up and down like that. Sometimes, and thank heavens it hasn't happened to this, all of these drawers are taken out and put back in with no linings so that a full dress or coat can hang all the way down. Luckily, and the charm about this is in absolutely original, untouched condition. The colour of this is absolutely magnificent. We just shut the door. How does that locks it, does it?
Yes, when you close that will hold that one shut as well.
And keeps it firm, then you can just lock it away.
Yeah.
But the colour of this is quite extraordinary. Mahogany, you should probably know.
Yeah.
Flame-figured mahogany, you may have heard that expression used.
No.
Flame-figured mahogany is from the top of the tree. If you imagine my hand is the tree trunk,
yes,
and here are the branches coming out.
Yeah.
At this stage, the tussle between the branches and the trunk wanted to go up and the branches wanted to go out,
yeah,
you get this wonderful cut of mahogany. It's the crutch or curl of the tree.
Yeah.
And it's used to the best effect I've seen for a long time on this particular wardrobe. I can't resist just looking in here, though. Here we've got some of the nicest little gilt metal hanging hooks I've ever seen. Little acorn finial to put your jacket over. All gilt with water gilt brass, very, very nice quality. And this, interesting enough, machine-cut screw, so it's the very early part of machining,
yeah,
with the end just chopped off because it wouldn't actually go in the wooden support, which is quite an unusual thing, but typical of the quality of this type of Regency work. To date something like this is quite difficult. It's early 19th century. To be more specific, it could be as late perhaps as the Regency period, 1810 or 20, or even as late as 1830. Difficult to actually pin down exactly. Have you thought about how much it's worth?
I've absolutely no idea. We have a valuation which is something like 20 years old, which was about £1,000.
About £1,000. Well, that was quite an imaginative valuation then, 20 years ago, because quite often the prices can jump dramatically over that period. I think something like this today, it'll certainly be worth £3,000, and that could just be a little bit conservative, because you've got size, colour and period and original state. What a wonderful thing to bring on the roadshow.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is a wonderful thing, very flashy. You can see here, do you see those white star canes in that?
Yes.
Well, that's distinctive of the Baccarat factory.
Oh, I see.
Yeah? In the same way that this one here, which is the more standard Millefiori one, which is worth considerably less, I should say, has not only the same white star canes, but also it has, do you see those green arrow canes? That's another distinctive feature of Baccarat. So you have to know these little tricks in order to identify them.
Well, is all this in here, this...
That's called sort of, it's in cataloguing terms, it's called upset muslin. You see, it does simulate muslin. And they're all individual pieces of glass. Quite incredible. They're placed on a base, and then a molten glass is then poured on top, and then it's smoothed over. Yours has a very slight bruise here, which you can see.
Yes.
But that can easily be taken out at relatively very small cost, and would not affect the value of it at all. Now we come to the question of the value, don't we?
Yes.
Shall I just tell you, I think that one, being more standard, is worth about £200. This one, do you want to guess?
I wouldn't like to.
Well,
I have no idea.
I think it's probably, because of the rarity of the subject matter, it's certainly worth in excess of £1,000.
Good heavens.
And possibly as much as £1,500.
Good Lord.
Pleased?
Very pleased.
Good.
You do surprise me.
Good.
Very surprised.
Good.
Let me just grab this man on his shoulder and say, quick one. It looks like Davenport.
That's Davenport, yes.
Yeah.
And a very unusual one, that blue and white.
1820?
Yes, 1810-20, Spriggan, hunting scene. Lots of people did it, but that particular one. It's a nice big one as well.
Yes. Well, it's been used for what? Licorice?
Licorice.
Licorice, yeah.
Oh.
Right.
That's the story that goes down the family.
This is what in North East Lancashire we call a sugar pot.
Yeah.
Or a sugar cup. Because when you move into your new house, you knock on the neighbour next door and say, can I borrow a cup of sugar?
I see.
So you present them with that, you see. It's quite a standard trick.
Yeah.
Used to be.
Well, I know he's called Arthur Glendinning, and I believe the name of the picture is called Spring, but I can't tell you any more than that.
Yes, well, he's the son of a Victorian landscape painter, and so he's always known as Junior, Glendinning Junior. And unlike his father, he signs with a monogram here, which, as you see, which is the G and the A together. And again, unlike his father, he was caught up in the new revolution, and he went to France, like so many of his generation, in the 1880s to study under Bastien Lepage, and painted very beautiful realist oil paintings, and then came back to London, and in the 1890s, his oil paintings changed more to this, the female figure, nude figure in the landscape, or females in the landscape. And really, this painting is 1899, but here we're almost at the end of his oil painting career. He then went on to paint the most beautiful watercolors, and really, I think, probably gave up oil painting altogether. But we can see the whole joy of light, which is the influence of the French Impressionists, and the whole play of golden light and the flowers and everything. I think it's very beautiful.
I've always loved this. As I say, I've grown up with it all my life, and I've come to love it very much.
But you've had it restored relatively recently?
Never had anything done to it at all. We've never had anything done to it. It's never been cleaned or restored, anything.
Well, it's preserved most beautifully.
Thank you.
Yes, no, I think it's wonderful. And I don't know whether value comes into it for you or not.
Not really for me, no. It's always nice to know, I suppose, what one should insure it for or something like that.
Well, it is difficult, but I think it's, a fabulous work, and I would have thought somewhere between £15,000 and £25,000.
Had no expectation at all. That's magnificent. You've made a happy family, I think. That's marvellous. Thank you.
This lovely little cannon is obviously been used as the starting gun for a yacht club or something like that. But I should tell you now that it didn't originally start out life as that. In fact, it started out as considerably as an offensive weapon, and little ones like this are known as swivels, because if I pull this pin out the back, I can actually lift this up and down, and this mounting on here would either be put in the front of a small naval launch or stuck on the gunwale of a ship, and when you had boarders or something like trying to swarm over your gunwale, you could pick it up like that, put your match into the vent, and there would be a large charge of shot would be fired into them, and it would be considerably more effective than just firing 1 or 2 solid balls at them. The carriage is Victorian, and I would say something like about 1860 odd, but the tube is about 1800 to 1820, and it's rather interesting in that it's made out of gunmetal, which is a form of brass. It's a copper zinc alloy.
Yeah.
Most of these are actually made in iron, in cast iron, and probably this was made for a sort of merchant ship. It's not a naval piece because there are no naval markings on it. Were it to be a naval piece, they would have the King's cipher on there.
Yeah.
But it's probably made for a merchant ship or an East Indiaman or something like that, just largely as an anti-personnel weapon. Do you have the other one to it? I suspect there probably is another one. They normally are put out in pairs.
It was given to my father in about 1930 by a retired sea captain. And the house it came from had this one and another, one each side of the front door. I don't know what happened to the other one.
Oh, that's a real shame. In terms of value, this would easily make £1,000 today at auction, probably even more. So the pair, unfortunately, which doesn't exist anymore, would be somewhere around about £3,000 to £4,000.
Opening it up, we've got a lovely Maltese-shaped cross, mounted in gold, set with these lovely 4 table-cut diamonds, little tiny rubies at the top in all the crowns, and a very nice memorial inscription on the back. Died August 1821. A lovely piece of jewellery, mounted in gold. It's a nice commemorative piece. It's the sort of thing that would be bought today by any collector. But the special thing about this is the actual inscriptions on the box itself. So in this particular respect, the box is probably worth as much as the piece itself. Now, the nice thing here is that you've got all the provenance. The inscription on the box reads, in remembrance of the persecution, sufferings and death of Caroline of Brunswick, the injured Queen of England. It's a piece of English history, and it's a lovely piece to have. If my memory serves me correct, Caroline was the wife of George IV, who came to the throne around about in 1820, so she must have died round about this particular time. At that time, she'd actually left him and gone back to Italy, as I understand it. And came back and was actually shut out of the coronation. I'm sure that you must have done a bit of research on this yourself. Yes. How far did you get with it?
Well, I got more or less the full story, right up to the time she was shut out of the abbey, and then when he was crowned king, they opened the doors and said, God save the king. But she was very disappointed she was not made queen.
But what a lovely piece of history. Were it not for the royal connections and the provenance that you have, and it's always difficult, provenance, but here you've got it chapter and verse. It's a sort of piece that I would have said to you at auction today would certainly make 2,000 to 3,000. But, you know, with that sort of provenance and the history that you've got, it would certainly at least, I think, treble that sort of money. And if 2 collectors got together, I'm sure that there'd be a battle royal to have it.
What do you think this is? As an object?
Oh, it's a teapot, definitely.
You think it's definitely a teapot?
I do.
I wish I could be so definite. Why are you so sure it's a teapot?
Well, my mother-in-law told me when she died, she was 86, and she'd been dead about 14 or 15 years. And she said when she was a little girl that they used to use it as a teapot. And she said her father used to say to her, go and sit on that chair over there, and I'll put this teapot straight. And she said, you'll see, it's a snake charging for you. And she says to me, I really used to think it was a snake because the head of it seemed to be. And she said, we really used it all the time as a teapot. I said, it's a wonder it didn't get broken.
I said that because it's not entirely clear whether, in fact, these were teapots or whether they were punch pots.
Oh!
And we simply don't know.
No.
I mean, it would serve the function very well for a teapot. And in fact, you've got a small hole in the lid, which suggests that it might have been. But of course, punch was served hot, so it could serve the same purpose.
Of course, yes.
So because you know its history, you think it's got a bit of age to it, do you?
Yes, well, when my mother-in-law gave it to me, she said to me, look after it now, because she said it's over 100 years old, she said. It was very old when I was a little girl, she said, because she said, my granny used to have it even before us, and I thought, well, it seems a bit far back, that really, doesn't it, when she was 86?
Well, we get told this, I think, as a story more than anything else. People say, well, it belonged to my grandmother and her grandmother, and they add it all up together, and they arrive at sort of 200 or 300 years. And we almost always have to discount the story.
Yes.
It's got muddled in the family. In this particular case, it's more than true. This is actually a very ancient pot indeed.
Oh.
It's Staffordshire, Wealdon, and it was probably made about 1740 to 1750.
Oh,
so
fancy.
It's several hundred years old. It's been made of a soft pottery, which has been thrown on a wheel. In fact, you can see ridges on the inside where the potter's hand has drawn it up. It's not a moulded one.
Oh,
and having done that, I think these are often called engine turning, because they invented a process of putting a pot onto an eccentric lathe, and you could turn patterns on it. This one, I think, is more simple. I think he's left it on the wheel, held a tool here, and simply produced those lines by going down.
Oh, yes. Mm.
And these, of course, are then moulded separately and stuck on.
Yes.
And they look a little uncomfortable, as if they might have come from another pot, which indeed they might have done.
Yeah.
They just, it doesn't fit together too well. It's then glazed with lead glazes. And these colours have come from a Chinese tradition. They've come through the sort of Tang pottery, through the egg and spinach glazes of the 17th century, and here they are appearing on an 18th century English pot.
It's rather attractive, the colouring, I think.
You like it?
I do,
I think
yes.
it's absolutely wonderful.
I do, I like the colouring very much.
Have you thought about selling it?
Oh, no, I love it too much to sell it.
No. Well, that's marvellous. It's nice to have somebody who really loves it.
I do, I really love it.
But it is something which is of some value. I mean, have you any idea what it's worth?
No. No. I haven't any idea, because my mother-in-law gave it to me, you know.
You think it might be worth several £100s?
I don't know, I don't think so.
You wouldn't have thought so?
No.
No. So you mean if I told you it was worth £600 or £800, you'd be really shocked, would you?
Oh, I would.
Right. So if I told you it was worth £1,500, you'd be really shocked.
Oh, you're kidding, aren't you?
Well, I am kidding, actually.
Oh.
It's actually worth about £5,000 to £6,000. Are you all right?
Oh, you mean it, don't
I mean
you?
it, absolutely. It's exactly what the market is desperate for. I don't think I've ever seen such a large good one.
Oh, gosh, isn't that marvellous?
Well, what a wonderful way to start our new series of the Antiques Roadshow. We've seen some wonderful things here today, very high-quality pictures, a superb piece of jewellery, and even that Liverpool porcelain that I was talking about at the beginning of the programme. But I think the one thing that we will remember more than anything else about our day in Liverpool will be the people themselves. First of all, very large numbers of them, over 5,000 people we've seen today. That makes this one of our highest ever attendances. But also, whenever there are large crowds like that, it inevitably means that people have to hang about a bit. They have to wait before they see the experts, and they've done that without complaint and with great good humour. So our warmest thanks to the people of Merseyside, and we hope that you and they will join us next week when we take the roadshow to northwest London. So until then, from all of us here in Liverpool, goodbye.
And you may like to know that the punch pot was subsequently sold for over £14,000, enabling